The clock on the kitchen wall glowed 12:14 as I sat in my favorite chair, a cup of lavender tea warming my hands. The house was quiet. The kind of quiet that usually wrapped me in comfort after a long day of humming along with the gospel station. The porch swing creaked gently when I leaned back, and the soft night air carried the faint scent of honeysuckle from the garden outside. This was my time. The calm I had earned after years of raising my children on my own, working double shifts just to make sure Darius had shoes on his feet and food on the table. Darius, my boy, my pride once, now 35, and married to Alicia, with their little boy, Malik, who could light up a room with his grin. I had raised Darius with long hours, quiet sacrifices, and constant prayers. I thought I had taught him the difference between right and wrong, the value of hard work and honesty. Life has a way of testing those lessons, though, and that night would be no exception. The phone rang, its tone slicing through the stillness. My heart skipped a beat when I saw his name on the screen. Darius, breathing hard, his voice urgent. "Ma, my card got declined at the hotel. They won't let me leave until I pay. It's $9,000, Ma. Please, I'll pay you back next week. I promise." I gripped my tea mug a little tighter. $9,000. That wasn't just a hotel bill, it was nearly a whole month's pension. I could feel the tension curling in my chest. But my voice stayed calm as I asked, "Darius, what are you doing somewhere that costs that much?" He sighed, sharp and impatient. "Ma, not now. Just send it. You got it in your savings. I'll explain later. If you don't, they won't let me go." There was a note of desperation in his tone, but something in me paused, warning bells ringing quietly. I asked, "Where's Alicia?" He hesitated. "She's asleep, okay? Just send it, Ma. Don't call her, please." I froze for a heartbeat. "Don't call her?" I repeated softly. That line alone chilled the warmth in my chest. My own son, begging for thousands of dollars in the dead of night, and asking me to go behind his wife's back. My fingers hovered over the phone. I took a steadying breath and said firmly, "Call your wife, Darius. She's the one you share a bed with, not me." Before he could respond, I ended the call and set the phone down. Silence returned to the room, but it was heavier now, carrying a strange clarity. I had done what I felt was right. I had listened to that small, insistent voice in my gut, telling me this wasn't ordinary trouble. I stared out the window at the dim glow of the streetlights, watching the world settle into its own late-night rhythm. My mind traced back to all the times I had helped him, loans, promises, excuses, and how each time the weight of those actions had shifted a little more, leaving me wary. The tea cooled in my hands, but I didn't move. I let the quiet stretch, feeling both the sting of disappointment and a cautious sense of control. I spoke softly to myself, the words barely louder than a whisper. "Have you ever felt your gut scream something's wrong?" My eyes lingered on the empty porch swing, the calm night air brushing my face. I thought of my neighbors, of the other mothers who had faced the same unease, and I wondered, how often do we ignore that warning in the name of love? The wind stirred the curtains and carried with it the faint sounds of a city at rest. I set the cup down and allowed my thoughts to settle. If someone called you for that much money at midnight, what would you do? I asked into the empty room, already knowing the answer would vary, but hoping my reflection might stir something in anyone listening. That was the night everything began to shift. My quiet evening had ended, replaced with a tension that would not soon leave me. The morning light crept through the blinds, soft and pale, brushing against the worn carpet of my bedroom. I was still half dreaming when the phone rang. My chest tightened as I saw the caller ID, Atlanta Police Department. Every nerve in me tensed as I lifted the receiver. "Good morning, ma'am. Is this Mrs. Evelyn Turner?" a calm voice asked. "Yes," I replied, my voice steady though my heart was hammering. "This is Officer Daniels. We have your son, Darius Turner, in custody," the officer said plainly. "Custody?" The words caught in my throat. My stomach sank. "Is he okay?" "Yes. Physically, he's fine. But he was brought in last night around 1:08 under suspicion of attempted fraud. The hotel reported a suspicious transaction. Someone tried to charge nearly $10,000 using an elderly woman's debit card. My hands froze around the receiver. My own blood. My son. "I didn't," I whispered, the thought barely forming. "Thank you, ma'am. That's all we needed to confirm. He'll likely be released on bail this afternoon." I sank into the edge of my bed, staring at the pale wall. Months of small loans, excuses, and promises flashed before me. Each time he asked for money, each time I had believed him, thinking my child was simply in trouble. I had been blinded by love. Now I saw the pattern, the quiet erosion of trust, and it left me hollow. The phone rang again. This time, Alicia. Her voice trembled with confusion. "Miss Evie, I don't understand. Darius told me he was at a business conference." "Neither do I, baby," I said, keeping my tone level. "But it seems he was using my card for something else entirely." Alicia's gasp carried through the line. "Wait, he's been lying?" "I'm afraid so," I said softly. "And we need to figure out exactly how deep this goes." I remembered the small withdrawals he had asked for over the past few months. 300 here, 200 there, each one accompanied by a story or excuse. Each time I had justified it in my mind. Just temporary, he'll pay me back. It's nothing serious. But now, the pieces clicked together with a chill clarity. Later, Darius called himself. I could hear the frustration, the anger, the quick defensiveness. "Ma, you don't know what it's like. They set me up. I was trying to protect you." "Protect me?" I asked, voice calm but edged with pain. "By using my name and my money without asking?" "It wasn't like that," he shouted. "I was going to tell you." "You've said that before," I reminded him quietly but firmly. "Each time the truth comes too late. And each time I lose a little more trust in you." There was silence on the line, then a softer plea. "Please, Ma, don't tell Alicia. If she finds out, she'll take Malik. She'll leave." I heard no guilt, only fear. Fear of being exposed, fear of losing control. That was a revelation as sharp as any knife. My child wasn't sorry for what he had done. He was sorry he had been caught. I hung up the phone and sat in quiet reflection, letting the tension settle into resolve. My hands trembled slightly, the weight of betrayal and responsibility pressing down. I took a deep breath and spoke softly into the empty room. "Would you protect a child who betrayed you?" I asked, the words hanging in the morning air. Comment yes or no below. My gaze drifted to the small photograph of Malik on the nightstand. His innocence, his trusting smile, reminded me of the stakes beyond anger and hurt. "Share if you've ever had to face someone you love doing something wrong," I whispered. The choices we make now shape everything that comes next. The sun climbed higher, spilling warmth over the kitchen table where my tea had gone cold. I poured another cup, letting the steam curl in the morning light. The quiet now was different. Heavier, but sharper. I knew that today would be the start of reckoning, not just for Darius, but for the life I had carefully built, the love I had given, and the boundaries I could no longer ignore. The phone rang again that afternoon, and I knew before I picked it up who it would be. Darius. My fingers tightened around the receiver as I said, "Hello? Ma, come on. You don't know what it's like. They set me up." His voice trembled between anger and desperation. "I was trying to protect you." I let him speak, listening without interruption. I had heard this tone countless times before, frantic, pleading, defensive. But now it sounded hollow. I remained calm, my voice steady, as I asked, "Protect me by trying to take money from me without asking." I was gonna explain in the morning," he stammered, frustration and fear mingling in every word. "You always blow things out of proportion." I leaned back in my chair and allowed a silence to settle over the line. That pause was weighty. It let him hear, without my saying it outright, that the days of excuses and cover-ups were over. "You've done this before, Darius," I said quietly. Each word deliberate. "Every time you asked for money, every story, every sob story, I believed you. But each time, the truth came too late." His voice softened, faltering now, trying a new tactic. "Ma, please don't tell Alicia. She'll take Malik. She'll leave." I caught it then, the subtle shift. He wasn't sorry for what he had done. Not really. He was only afraid. Afraid of losing control, afraid of exposure. There was no guilt, no hint of remorse, just fear pressing against the edge of his voice. That realization cut sharper than anger. I closed my eyes briefly, recalling all the years I had nurtured him. The sacrifices, the sleepless nights, the prayers whispered into the dark. I had tried to shape him into someone honest, someone strong. And now I saw, in stark relief, that love alone was not enough to steer him. "Darius," I said slowly, deliberately, "I hear your fear. But fear is not apology. Fear is not accountability. And it is not enough to make things right." His breathing quickened, pleading spilling over. "Ma, I didn't mean to." I held up my hand, cutting him off without raising my voice. "Stop! I've listened to enough pleas. I've seen enough patterns. This is bigger than a single mistake." A silence stretched across the line again. I could almost hear him trying to gauge how far I would go, whether I would bend, but I did not. "That call at midnight," I continued, "wasn't a cry for help. It was a demand, a test, and I refused to take it. I felt something inside me shift in that moment. The ache of betrayal softened into something harder, sharper, resolute. The love I carried for him remained, of course, but it had transformed. It was no longer blind or indulgent. It had become protective, not just of him, but of everyone affected by his choices. The room felt colder now, the weight of clarity settling in. My hands rested on the phone, steady, as I added quietly, "Some might forgive, others would act. What would you do in my place?" His voice trembled again, smaller now, stripped of bravado. "Ma, I'm sorry." I let the words hang in the air without comment. Apologies without accountability held no power here. My gaze drifted to the photograph of Malik on the nightstand, his small face smiling up at me. The stakes had changed. This was no longer about my son alone. It was about the life surrounding him, the example being set, the lessons he must finally learn. I closed the call without another word, the click of the receiver final. The afternoon sunlight spilled across the table, and I sat in stillness, thinking through every thread of deception, every moment of trust I had given that was returned with betrayal. I spoke softly into the quiet room, addressing not only myself, but anyone who might listen. Comment if you think she should trust him again or not. A strange calm settled over me, but it was different from the gentle evenings I had once known. This calm carried determination, a sense of steel beneath it. Love had not vanished, it had sharpened, and that sharpening brought with it resolve. That resolve would guide every step I would take next. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the air thick with unease. The lavender tea sat untouched, cooling in its cup, while my mind replayed the events of the past 24 hours. The betrayal stung sharply, not just because of the money, but because of the trust I had placed in my own child. I opened my laptop slowly, the familiar hum filling the quiet room. My bank account. I hesitated a moment before logging in, steadying my hands. Then I began scrolling through transactions, line by line. Small withdrawals, first $300 here, $200 there. Each one seemed harmless at a glance, easy to dismiss, but the pattern emerged quickly. Each transaction was made from the same location. Each had an excuse attached when I asked about it: business expenses, unexpected fees, temporary loan. Over months, these small amounts had added up to a significant sum, and all of them had gone through without hesitation, without concern for who might notice. I felt a tightening in my chest. It wasn't the money alone that hurt, it was that someone I had raised with care and love had calculated these steps carefully, counting on my trust. The quiet, steady accumulation of betrayal cut deeper than any shout or confrontation could. I printed the statements, folding them into neat stacks, each page a record of deception. I reviewed the details again and again, making notes of every suspicious withdrawal, every pattern of timing, every inconsistency in his stories. My mind worked methodically, connecting dots that had seemed insignificant when viewed separately. Then I called an old friend, Detective Rhonda Graves. I hadn't spoken to her in months, not since choir practice and the occasional church fundraiser, but I knew her judgment. I knew her honesty. She picked up on the second ring. "Evie Turner," she said, her voice warm but cautious. "It's been a while. What's going on?" "Rhonda," I said, "steady now. I need your help. My son, he's been taking from me, from my accounts. I have the records, every withdrawal, every story he told to cover it up. I think it's more than just this. It looks like a pattern." There was a pause on the line, just long enough for the weight of the words to settle. Then she asked, "Evie, how much are we talking about?" I detailed the amounts, the months, the small withdrawals that led to larger ones. I explained the midnight call, the desperate tone, the fear disguised as pleading. She listened carefully, her tone measured as she processed the situation. "This isn't just a family dispute," she said finally. "This is a pattern of fraud. I've seen similar setups at the dealership downtown. If what you're saying is accurate, this could extend beyond your account." My hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with the gravity of understanding. The betrayal wasn't just financial, it was personal. An erosion of trust I hadn't realized had been happening quietly for months. I paused, letting the weight of the revelation settle. Pause for a moment. Imagine the shock of seeing your own bank drained month after month. "Your child behind it," I whispered, almost to myself, almost to anyone who might listen. Detective Graves gave me clear instructions, advising me to compile everything and keep a record of each piece of evidence. "Evie," she said, "we'll make sure this is handled properly. You're doing the right thing. But remember, timing and precision matter. Don't act too quickly without documentation." I folded the printed statements, aligning them neatly, and placed them in a folder labeled carefully with the date and purpose. Each piece of paper was a step toward clarity, a step toward reclaiming control in a situation that had begun to feel like it had no boundaries. I took a breath and looked around my quiet kitchen. The night had deepened, the lavender tea long cold, the hum of the refrigerator filling the space. I knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy, but one thought remained clear. If I didn't act now, if I let fear or love override judgment, the consequences would stretch far beyond me. I turned to the camera, if it was someone watching, and asked softly, "What would you do if you found out your child had been stealing from you for months?" Comment below. And I knew, as I closed the laptop, that this was no longer just about money. It was about trust, about lessons that needed to be learned, and about the courage to face what had been hidden in plain sight. The next morning, I returned to the kitchen table, armed with a fresh cup of lavender tea and a determination that had settled deep in my chest overnight. The printed bank statements lay in a neat stack beside me, I began sorting through them carefully, each line item a piece of a story Darius had tried to keep hidden. 300 here, 200 there, small, almost innocuous amounts. But together, they painted a picture of someone calculating, someone comfortable taking advantage of the trust of the one person who had always protected him. I made notes in the margins, circling suspicious patterns, writing down dates, amounts, and any correspondence that coincided with the withdrawals. Each annotation was a breadcrumb leading me closer to the full story, not out of vengeance alone, but to ensure accountability and to protect my grandson, Malik, from inheriting a world built on deception. Once the records were fully examined, I carefully placed them into a manila folder. The label was simple yet precise. For Officer Graves. Every transaction, every suspicious call, every detail Darius had tried to hide was now safely documented. This folder wasn't just paper and ink, it was a record of truth, a shield for the people who mattered most to me. Later that day, I drove over to Alicia's house. She answered the door, looking nervous, her small hands clutching Malik's toy car as if it could shield her from what was coming. I told her everything. The midnight call, the small withdrawals, the patterns I'd discovered. Her reaction was a mix of disbelief, shock, and anger. She sank onto the couch, covering her mouth with one hand while gripping Malik with the other. I can't believe this, she whispered. I thought it was just business struggles, not stealing from your own mother. Seeing her tremble, I felt a shift inside me. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about protecting Malik, showing him that integrity matters, that choices have consequences, and that no one, not even a parent, should be allowed to undermine the safety and trust of a family. Alicia handed me envelopes of unpaid bills, collection notices, and letters Darius had left behind. She spoke quietly but firmly. Miss Evie, he's been hiding all of this from me. I trusted him. We trusted him. I nodded, my resolve solidifying. The betrayal cut deeper than the financial strain. It was a lesson that needed to be taught, carefully, deliberately, and without hesitation. My heart wasn't cruel. It was protective. Malik's innocence had become the anchor, guiding every decision I made. I returned home and began organizing everything once more. Each document, each note, each proof of deceit was carefully filed. This was more than paperwork, it was preparation. Preparation for a lesson Darius would never forget. One that would echo through every choice he made from that moment forward. I paused, glancing at Malik's small photo, taped to my fridge, and whispered softly, "What Miss Evie is about to do will change everything. Stay until the end to see how." Setting the folder aside, I allowed myself a brief moment of reflection. If someone had asked me, would you stop him quietly or confront him openly? I knew the answer. Quietly, carefully, strategically. There was power in patience, in methodical action, and in the ability to act with clarity while the world around you remained unaware. By the time the afternoon sunlight filtered through the blinds, I had compiled every piece of evidence, organized it in chronological order, and prepared a plan for the next steps. The folder sat on the table like a promise, a silent declaration that the days of excuses and half-truths were over. As I leaned back in my chair, sipping the now lukewarm tea, I realized something profound about motherhood. Sometimes, the most important lessons require more than words. They require action, and I was ready to act. To those watching, I asked quietly, almost as if sharing a secret, if you were her, would you stop him quietly or confront him openly? Comment below. The room settled into silence, my hands resting over the folder, the weight of responsibility and clarity pressing gently but firmly against my chest. Malik's future and the integrity of the family depended on the steps I would take next. I sat in my favorite rocking chair that evening, the soft creak under me keeping time with my racing thoughts. The kitchen light was low, the lavender tea long finished, and outside, the evening stretched over our quiet Atlanta street. For a moment, I let myself breathe, letting the reality of what I had uncovered settle like dust on the shelves. The small withdrawals, the carefully hidden transactions, the desperate midnight call, it all weighed heavily, but my resolve had not wavered. Sitting there, I reflected on the life I'd built. 67 years of hard work, of raising my children, of nurturing and protecting, had taught me patience and discernment. But this situation was testing every lesson I had learned. Darius had crossed a line that couldn't be ignored. Every mother wants to shield her child, but how far does protection go when the child has chosen to betray that trust repeatedly? I thought of Malik, playing across the street in the fading sunlight, his small hands clutching a stick as if it were a sword. He had no idea the storm gathering beyond the walls of our homes. His innocence, his trust in the adults around him, had become my compass. Protecting him had to take precedence over fear, over guilt, over sentimentality. I leaned back, closing my eyes briefly, and acknowledged the moral struggle tugging at me. The stakes were high. If I hesitated, if I delayed, Darius might continue his actions, draining more resources, leaving more chaos behind. And if I acted too quickly without careful planning, the outcome could spiral in ways I couldn't control. I had to find balance between justice and caution, between the instinct to forgive and the need to teach lessons that mattered. As I sat there, the thought occurred. We've all had to make tough choices. Situations where doing nothing feels easier, safer. But what would we do if the well-being of the next generation rested in our hands? Would we find the courage to act, even when it meant confronting someone we love? I pressed my fingers against the arm of the chair, feeling the weight of my decision, and whispered to myself, we've all faced moments like this, but will we step forward when it counts? The quiet allowed me to trace the events in my mind once more. The hotel call at midnight, the insistence that I provide the money, the patterns of small withdrawals, all signs that the situation was escalating. And yet, I reminded myself that patience had its own power. I wasn't about to rush, but neither would I ignore what I knew. I glanced at the manila folder on the table, the stack of printed transactions and notes I had meticulously organized. It felt heavy in a way that was almost physical, each document a step toward clarity, toward action. The evidence wasn't just numbers on paper, it was a testament to truth. And soon, it would become the foundation for consequences that had been long overdue. The tension in the room was quiet but insistent. Every creak of the floorboard, every distant car horn seemed to underscore the moments of waiting. I sipped from the now cold mug, the flavor of lavender, muted but comforting, and allowed myself a brief reflection. This was the calm before the storm. What came next would test patience, resolve, and courage in ways I hadn't experienced before. I thought of my neighbors, my friends from church, the community I had grown with over decades. We all face moments where right and easy diverge, where action demands bravery. This was my moment. I drew a deep breath. Steadying myself, the next steps would be deliberate, calculated, and just. I picked up the phone, my finger hovering over the screen, and smiled faintly to myself. "Subscribe now," I whispered, as if sharing a secret, to see how a mother's quiet justice can unfold. The evening faded slowly into night. Outside, the city settled. Unaware of the careful planning taking place in a modest kitchen, I leaned back again, folding my hands over the manila folder, letting the weight of responsibility rest on me fully. I knew the coming days would bring change. But for the first time since the midnight call, I felt certain that the path I had chosen was the right one. The day arrived with a clarity that cut through the usual haze of morning in Atlanta. I had spent the night reviewing the manila folder, rehearsing the story I would tell Detective Rhonda Graves, ensuring every detail was accurate. By mid-morning, the call came. Darius was being brought in, the charges formally filed. It wasn't easy to hear, but I knew it was necessary. As I drove to the precinct, memories of raising Darius flooded back: the sleepless nights when he was sick, the birthdays, the first day of school, the little boy who once ran barefoot through our yard, laughing without care. All of that weighed against the man who had called at midnight, pleading for $9,000 that he did not deserve. The contrast was sharp, bitter, and painful. But it fueled my resolve. When I arrived, Alicia was already there, holding Malik close. Her eyes met mine, gratitude and relief written across her face. "Miss Evie," she said softly, "thank you. I don't know how to explain it, but you saved us." I shook my head, offering only a faint smile. I hadn't saved anyone. I had simply acted with clarity, ensuring the consequences Darius faced would teach him a lesson he could not ignore. Inside the precinct, the process moved methodically. Darius sat across from officers, his posture stiff, jaw tight. I handed over the manila folder, watching as Detective Graves reviewed it carefully. Every line, every transaction, every note was laid bare, a record of deception that could no longer be hidden. The look on Darius's face shifted as the realization set in: this wasn't a temporary problem, it was a reckoning. The charges included fraud, identity theft, and unauthorized use of financial accounts. Each one carried weight. Each one a testament to choices he had made despite repeated chances to do right. I stayed seated, hands folded, heart steady. This was justice, not vengeance. It was accountability, not cruelty. Later, news outlets caught wind of the case. Local reports mentioned a family dispute with financial implications, and though the details were carefully contained, the whispers traveled fast. Neighbors stopped by, curious, some offering quiet words of support, others with hesitant judgment. I greeted each with calm acknowledgement, my focus unshaken. The external noise mattered little. What mattered was the truth and the protection of the innocent Malik, Alicia, and anyone else Darius might have harmed if his actions went unchecked. After the formalities, I stepped outside, letting the sunlight wash over me. For the first time in days, I felt a release. The tension that had gripped my chest since the midnight call eased, replaced by a measured peace. The knowledge that steps had been taken, that justice had been ensured, allowed my thoughts to quiet. Alicia joined me, her hand brushing mine gently. "He's going to have to face everything," she said, voice small but firm, "and maybe, someday, he'll understand why this had to happen." I nodded, feeling the weight of truth in her words. Sometimes, love isn't about forgiveness, it's about stopping harm before it spreads, before it becomes irreversible. Malik played nearby, unaware of the storm that had passed, his laughter light and easy. Protecting him, ensuring his world remained safe and filled with trust, had been my guiding principle all along. I realized that justice wasn't only about consequences for Darius, it was about preserving innocence, reinforcing values, and teaching lessons that words alone could never convey. Later, when I returned home, I settled into my rocking chair once more. The radio hummed softly in the background, a familiar companion, but my mind was quiet. The fear, the anxiety, and the tension that had dominated the past days were gone. In their place was satisfaction, a steady calm, a sense of rightness that came from having acted decisively. I thought about the choices that had led me here. The midnight call, the months of hidden withdrawals, the careful preparation of evidence, the coordination with Detective Graves, all of it had been necessary. It wasn't easy, but I had no regrets. I had chosen truth over comfort, protection over blind loyalty, and accountability over excuses. To those watching, I ask, was Miss Evie right to involve the police? Comment below with your thoughts. Sometimes the hardest decisions carry the deepest impact. And if you have a loved one who might be heading down a dangerous path, don't wait until it's too late. Subscribe now, so you can learn how to act with clarity before harm spreads. That night, as the city lights flickered outside, I looked out over the quiet street. Darius's choices had consequences, but the family's safety, Malik's innocence, and the integrity of our household had been preserved. Peace settled around me, steady and unshakable. I had acted as a mother must, fierce, deliberate, and unwavering. Sometimes love isn't about forgiveness, it's about ensuring that the ones we care for, even our own children, understand the importance of honesty, respect, and boundaries. And that night, as I closed my eyes with a quiet sigh, I knew that lesson had been delivered firmly and effectively. The following morning brought an unexpected quiet. The house felt lighter, as if the weight of tension had finally lifted. I was sipping my lavender tea, watching Malik arrange his toy cars across the living room floor, when the phone rang. The screen read blocked number. My hand froze for a moment, but I answered. "Ma." The voice trembled, small and unfamiliar. It was Darius. Gone was the confident, pleading tone from the midnight call. What I heard now was soft, remorseful, the voice of someone facing the reality of their choices. "They say I could be in there for years. You really turned me in?" I remained silent for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle. He needed to understand the consequences, not just for the actions themselves, but for the trust he had shattered. "You turned yourself in, son," I said calmly. "Every lie, every withdrawal, that was your decision. I just stopped covering the mess." A quiet sob escaped him, the kind of sob that speaks of regret too deep for excuses. "I'm sorry, Ma," he whispered. It was short, but sincere, in the only way it could be at that moment. "I know," I replied softly, "and I hope one day you truly mean it." I let the silence stretch, allowing him to reflect. Then the guard's voice came through, calling his time. The line clicked dead, leaving me staring at the receiver, a sense of finality settling over the room. I sat back, breathing in the calm. Years of worry, anxiety, and heartache had led to this moment. For so long, I thought being a mother meant shielding your child from the consequences of their choices. But sometimes protecting them, and others around them, means hard love. It means stepping back and letting accountability do its work. Malik wandered over, holding a toy in one hand, curiosity in his wide eyes. "Grandma, do you think Daddy's gonna be okay?" I knelt to his level, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "He will be, baby. He just has to learn his lesson." Sometimes the right path isn't easy, but it helps you grow. His small hand found mine, gripping it tight. "You're strong, Grandma," I chuckled softly, feeling warmth spread through me. "No, sweetheart, I just stopped being scared." That's the difference. Watching him, I felt the thread of hope continue. Life would move forward, and the next generation Malik would witness honesty, boundaries, and respect in action. That continuity, that chance to instill values, was perhaps the most important victory of all. Later, as I rocked gently in my chair, the afternoon sun spilling through the curtains, I reflected on the journey. From the midnight call to the formal consequences, each choice had weighed heavily. I had felt fear, heartbreak, and disbelief, but also clarity, resolve, and ultimately empowerment. The role of a mother, and now grandmother, was not always comforting. Sometimes it demanded courage, foresight, and the willingness to make hard decisions. These days, my home feels lighter, but not empty. Conversations with Alicia and moments with Malik remind me of the purpose behind every tough choice. The world is safer for him, and my own heart feels steadier. no longer burdened by secrets or deception. I have grown through the experience, learning that empowerment is rooted in truth and consistent action. To anyone listening, reflecting on this story, I ask, have you ever faced a choice that required acting with hard love, even when it hurt? Share your story below. Let's create a space where real-life lessons in love, trust, and wisdom can be exchanged. And if you want to hear more stories that combine real-life consequences, family challenges, and lessons that resonate with the heart, subscribe now. Together, we can explore moments of courage, insight, and the quiet power of making the right choice, even when it's the hardest one to make. As the evening drew in, I sat by the porch swing, sipping my tea, listening to the distant hum of the city, and felt a deep, unwavering sense of peace. The betrayal, the choices, the lessons, they were all part of a life that had tested me, and through it, I had grown stronger, wiser, and steadier. Sometimes, the right action is the hardest one to take. Sometimes, love is measured not by what you protect, but by what you insist must be held accountable. And as I watched Malik's laughter echo through the yard, I knew that balance, that clarity, and that quiet strength would guide both of our paths forward.